My aunt showed up at my late grandfather's house and announced, "I'm taking everything." He wanted me to have it. I handed her a video file and said, "Press play." It was Grandpa saying she's never getting a dime. Her shrieks echoed through the street as the family watched. The reveal was epic. When my grandfather, Henry Foster, passed away, it was the end of an era. He was the backbone of our family, the kind of man who didn't say much but whose presence alone demanded respect. A man who built his life with his own hands, who worked in steel mills in Pittsburgh when he was young, who saved every penny and never took a shortcut. He was the kind of man who never left a room without turning the light off, who kept his tools in perfect order, who refused to replace something if it still worked. He was also a man who didn't forget. I knew it the moment I saw him record that video. The weight of his words, the way he looked into the camera as if staring straight into the future. He knew what was coming. He knew our family would fall apart over what he left behind. And he was right. It started the day of his funeral. We buried him in a quiet cemetery just outside the city, next to my grandmother. It was the kind of cold, gray Pittsburgh day that made everything feel heavier. The kind of day where grief sat in your chest like a brick. My sister, Rachel, and I stood by our parents, hands shoved deep into our coat pockets, while the preacher read the final words. I watched my father, a man who rarely showed emotion, press his lips together so hard they turned white. I saw my mother wipe her nose with a tissue, her eyes rimmed red. I saw Uncle Jeff standing a little apart from everyone, arms crossed, his face unreadable, and then there was her, Sylvia. Aunt Sylvia had shown up late, of course. She made sure everyone noticed when she arrived, clicking her heels against the pavement, tossing her expensive handbag over her shoulder, sighing loudly as she took her place. She didn't cry. Didn't even pretend to. I knew what she was thinking. She wasn't mourning Grandpa. She was calculating. When the last handful of dirt was tossed into the grave, people started making their way back to their cars. Some cousins offered quiet condolences before leaving. A few distant relatives lingered, speaking in hushed tones. And then, just as Rachel and I turned to leave, Sylvia made her move. So, that one word, just... I turned slowly, already bracing myself. She adjusted her sunglasses, even though the sun wasn't out. "When do we go through the house?" Rachel stiffened beside me. I looked at my father, expecting him to shut her down, but he was still staring at the grave, lost in thought. My mother wouldn't engage. Uncle Jeff muttered something under his breath and walked off toward his truck. That left me. I sighed. "We're meeting at the house tomorrow." Sylvia gave me a slow smile. Perfect. I didn't like the way she said it. I should have known right then that she had a plan. The next day, we gathered at Grandpa's house. It wasn't a mansion, just a solid two-story home in a quiet neighborhood. The kind of house that smelled like old books and coffee, where the floors creaked in familiar places, where the kitchen table had been the center of every major family conversation for decades. And now, it was just a battleground. I unlocked the door and stepped inside first. The air was thick with dust and something else, something heavier. The weight of the past, maybe. The others followed. My parents, Uncle Jeff, Rachel, a couple of cousins, and of course Sylvia. She walked in like she already owned the place. Her heels clicked against the hardwood floor as she made a slow circle, taking it all in. I could almost hear her thoughts. "This is mine. This should be mine." She exhaled dramatically. "Well, let's get this over with." I turned to face her fully. "Actually, before we start," but she cut me off. "No need for formalities, Nick." She flashed a tight smile. "We all know Grandpa wanted me to have everything." Silence. I looked around, expecting someone to speak up, but the room had gone still. Finally, Uncle Jeff let out a sharp laugh. "You can't be serious." Sylvia lifted her chin. "He told me, personally." "Really?" Rachel's voice was cold. "When?" "The last time you saw him." "Oh wait, that was 5 years ago." Sylvia's eyes flickered, just for a second. Then she smiled again, but it was the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes. "He loved me, and he knew I deserved it." I felt my pulse quicken. I wasn't a confrontational person by nature, but there was something about her smugness that made my blood boil. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. "You know what? Let's hear from Grandpa himself." Sylvia frowned. "What are you talking about?" I tapped the screen, turned up the volume, and held it up for everyone to see. The video started. There was Grandpa, sitting in his armchair, his old cardigan wrapped around him. His voice was rough but steady. "If Sylvia's watching this," he said, "she's never getting a dime." The room went silent. Grandpa leaned forward on the screen, his eyes sharp despite his frail body. "I know she's gonna come sniffing around, thinking she's entitled to something, but let me be clear, I don't trust her as far as I can throw her. She didn't visit me. She didn't call. She's spent her life taking and taking. Well, not this time. Everything goes to Nick and Rachel, period." The video ended. For a long moment, no one moved.
No one spoke. And then Sylvia laughed.
It wasn't a normal laugh. It was high-pitched, borderline hysterical. She shook her head, her hands trembling. That video could be fake. You doctored it. Rachel let out a slow breath. Wow, you just can't help yourself, can you? Sylvia's hands curled into fists. This isn't over, she whispered, but it was. She just didn't know it yet. Sylvia stood there, fists clenched, her chest rising and falling in short, angry breaths. The rest of us were still absorbing what had just happened. Grandpa had spoken, even from beyond the grave, and he'd made himself very clear. But if there was one thing I knew about my aunt, it was that she didn't take no for an answer. She wasn't going to walk away from this quietly. You know, she started, her voice carefully measured now, controlled. This could have been handled better. If we sat down like a civilized family, we could have discussed things properly. But instead, you're all treating me like some kind of villain. Uncle Jeff let out a sharp laugh. Oh, I wonder why. Sylvia ignored him, smoothing down the front of her coat like she was trying to regain her composure. Grandpa wasn't in his right mind toward the end, she continued, eyes locking onto mine. Maybe he thought he wanted this, but was that really fair? You gotta spend all that time with him, Nick. You were the one in his ear, influencing him. My jaw tightened. I wanted to tell her she had no right to speak about fairness when she hadn't even bothered to pick up the phone in years. But I forced myself to stay calm. This is what he wanted, I said simply. Sylvia's mouth twisted. Well, that's your version of events. I could see it in her face. She wasn't going to back down. She had convinced herself that Grandpa had wronged her somehow, that she deserved something from him, even if he had spent his final years barely mentioning her name. And that's when she changed tactics. Her eyes softened. Her shoulders slumped ever so slightly. She turned to my dad, the only person in the room who hadn't said much. Richard, she said, her voice almost gentle now. You're my brother. You know me. You know I never would have ignored Dad if I thought he needed me. Her voice hitched, as if she were trying to summon some kind of emotion. I regret not coming around more. I really do. My dad stared at her, expression unreadable. She took a step toward him, but I thought he was fine. I thought Nick had it handled. She shot me a glance, as if trying to plant the seed of doubt. How was I supposed to know he wanted me here? I clenched my teeth so hard, my jaw ached. Rachel took a sharp step forward. Oh, cut the bullshit, Sylvia. Sylvia recoiled like she'd been slapped. We all know you didn't think about Grandpa at all. Rachel continued, voice low and furious. You didn't call. You didn't visit. You weren't there when he needed help getting out of bed. You weren't there when he forgot things and got scared. You weren't there for any of it. A thick silence followed. Sylvia's expression hardened again. And you were? What? You came by a few times and suddenly that makes you better than me? Rachel scoffed. A few times? I was here almost every weekend. But it was Nick who did the most. He was the one making sure Grandpa had food, had his meds, had company. So yeah, actually, it does make us better than you. Sylvia's face turned red. I could see the wheels turning in her head, searching for a way to twist the situation back in her favor. But she had lost control of the conversation, and she knew it. So she did what Sylvia always did when she didn't get her way. She threw a tantrum. You're all against me, she shrieked, her voice rising in pitch. This family has always treated me like I'm less than, like I don't matter. But I was Dad's daughter, and that means something. You can't just push me out like this. I took a slow breath, forcing my voice to stay level. No one is pushing you out. Grandpa made his decision. That's it. Sylvia shook her head violently, backing up toward the front door. She was breathing hard, her hands shaking. This isn't over, she spat. You'll see, you all will. And with that, she spun on her heel and stormed out. The sound of the door slamming echoed through the house. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then finally, Uncle Jeff exhaled a low whistle. Well, he muttered, that went about as well as I expected. I ran a hand down my face, exhausted already. I wanted to believe that was the last we'd hear from her, that she'd stomp off, vent to whatever unlucky friend she had, and then let it go. The house felt eerily quiet after Sylvia left, like the air had shifted somehow. I let out a slow breath and rubbed the back of my neck. My dad still hadn't moved from where he stood, his expression unreadable. My mom was staring at the door, like she expected Sylvia to come bursting back in at any second. Rachel was the first to break the silence. She's going to fight this. I nodded. Yeah. Uncle Jeff scoffed. Let her try. The will is airtight. And that video? She's got nothing. I wanted to believe him, but I knew Sylvia. She didn't care about legal documents or logic. She only cared about what she thought she was owed. And if she couldn't get what she wanted the easy way, she'd find another way. I turned to my dad. You okay? He blinked, like he was coming back to reality, then nodded. Yeah. It didn't sound convincing. She put you on the spot, I said carefully. She always does, he muttered. He finally looked at me, his face tight with something I couldn't quite place. You did the right thing, Nick. That should have made me feel better. But something about the way he said it felt off. Before I could dwell on it, Uncle Jeff clapped his hands together. Alright, so what now? Are we going through his stuff today? Or do we need to put up booby traps in case Sylvia comes crawling through a window? Rachel sighed. Might not be a bad idea. We should at least get an idea of what's here, I said. The house isn't going anywhere. But I don't want anything disappearing if Sylvia does find a way back in. We spent the next few hours sorting through Grandpa's belongings. It was slow, and more emotional than I expected. Every drawer we opened, every shelf we dusted off, felt like we were uncovering little pieces of him. His old flannel shirts still smelled like his cologne. His workbench in the garage was exactly the way he'd left it, tools lined up perfectly. Rachel found a stack of old letters in a box in the closet, and we all got caught up reading them. Some from when he was in the army, some from my grandmother when they were young and still figuring each other out. It was a side of him I had never really seen before, and it made me wish I'd asked him more questions while I still had the chance. It was late afternoon when we finally wrapped up for the day. "You staying here tonight?" Uncle Jeff asked as he grabbed his coat. I nodded, just in case. Rachel squeezed my arm. "Call me if anything happens." "I will." One by one, they left. My parents were the last to go, and my dad hesitated at the door for a moment before finally giving me a small nod and walking out. Then it was just me. I locked the door, did a quick check of the windows, then collapsed onto the couch. My body was exhausted, but my mind wouldn't shut off. Sylvia wasn't finished. I knew it, and I had a bad feeling. I hadn't seen the worst of her yet. The next morning, my phone buzzed me awake. I groaned, rubbing my eyes as I fumbled for it. It was Rachel. I sat up, immediately alert. "What's wrong? You need to get over to Mom and Dad's." Her voice was tight, clipped. My stomach sank. "What happened?" There was a pause. Then she sighed. Sylvia lawyered up. I closed my eyes and let my head fall back against the couch. Of course she did. I gripped my phone tighter and exhaled slowly. "She actually went and did it, huh?" "Yeah," Rachel said, frustration thick in her voice. "She's claiming the will isn't valid. Says Grandpa was mentally incompetent when he wrote it." I let out a humorless laugh. "Right. The same man who balanced his checkbook every month and still corrected my grammar 2 weeks before he died? She's grasping at straws," Rachel agreed. "But she's got a lawyer, Nick, which means she's serious." Of course, she was. Sylvia never made empty threats. "Did she call Mom and Dad?" I asked. "Not directly," Rachel said. "Her lawyer sent them a letter this morning." Mom called me in a panic. I could already imagine my mom wringing her hands, pacing the kitchen. This was exactly what she had wanted to avoid. Family tearing itself apart over money. "All right," I said, forcing myself to stay calm. "I'll head over now." When I walked into my parents' house, Mom was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the letter like it was a BMB about to go off. Dad was at the counter, arms crossed, his face unreadable. Rachel was leaning against the fridge, arms folded tightly, her jaw clenched. "What are we looking at?" I asked, pulling out a chair. Mom pushed the letter toward me. "It's ridiculous." I scanned the paper quickly. It was a formal notice from Sylvia's lawyer, stating that she intended to contest the will on the grounds of Grandpa's supposed diminished mental capacity. She was demanding an official review, which could mean months of legal back and forth. "Unbelievable," I muttered. Rachel let out a sharp breath. "We have that video. Isn't that enough?" I nodded. "It definitely helps, but she's trying to make this as messy as possible." Mom's voice wavered. "What if she wins?" "She won't," I said firmly. But the truth was, I wasn't so sure. Contesting a will was complicated, and while I knew we had the law on our side, Sylvia had money. She could drag this out, wear us down. And maybe that was the point. Maybe she didn't even expect to win. Maybe she just wanted to make our lives miserable until we gave her something to make her go away. I wasn't about to let that happen. For the next few weeks, the legal battle began. Sylvia was relentless. Her lawyer pushed for medical records, claiming Grandpa had been showing signs of confusion. She pulled out old arguments, things Grandpa had said years ago when he was frustrated or tired, and twisted them into evidence. But we had our own proof. The video was our strongest defense, of course, but we also had medical records that showed Grandpa was of sound mind up until the very end. His doctors backed us up. His financial advisor provided statements, proving he had been handling his own affairs competently. The whole ordeal was exhausting. The paperwork, the meetings, the sheer pettiness of it all. It wore on all of us. Mom started losing sleep. Rachel was angrier than I'd ever seen her. Even Dad, usually so composed, seemed drained. And Sylvia? She was loving every second of it. She made a show of playing the victim, sighing dramatically whenever we ran into her. She told distant relatives that she was just fighting for what was right. She even went on a rant on Facebook about greedy family members stealing her inheritance. But then, she made a mistake, a big one. One evening, I got a call from Uncle Jeff. "You're gonna want to see this," he said, amusement thick in his voice. He sent me a screenshot of a text conversation. It was from Sylvia, and it was damning. She had messaged one of our cousins, Carla, and let it slip that she knew the will was real, but that she was dragging this out to force us into a settlement. Her exact words, "I don't even need to win. They'll fold eventually. It's cheaper for them to just pay me off." I stared at the screen, heart pounding. Rachel, who had been sitting across from me, read over my shoulder and let out a sharp laugh. "She really put that in writing?" "Yep," I said, "and Carla sent it straight to Jeff." Rachel grinned. "This is beautiful." Our lawyer was thrilled. When we presented the text messages in court, Sylvia's case crumbled. Her whole argument had been based on the idea that Grandpa was confused, that he hadn't meant to leave her out. But now, we had proof that she knew the truth all along, that she was deliberately trying to extort us. The judge dismissed her claims almost immediately. She got nothing. And the best part, the court ordered her to pay our legal fees. That was the final nail in the coffin. She had dragged us through weeks of stress, spent thousands on a lawyer, made a fool of herself in front of the entire family. And for what? To walk away with less than nothing. The last time I saw her, she was storming out of the courthouse, muttering curses under her breath. Her expensive lawyer was nowhere in sight. She had lost, and she knew it. Rachel and I just watched her go, saying nothing. There was nothing left to say. A week later, I stood in Grandpa's house, looking around one last time before we started making decisions about what to do with it. It still smelled like him. I walked over to his old chair, running my fingers along the worn-out armrest. Rachel sat down across from me. "He would have been proud of you, you know?" I let out a breath, nodding. I wasn't sure what was going to happen next. But one thing was for certain. Grandpa had made his choice, and in the end, he got the final word. Sylvia, she was just another lesson in what happens when you let greed drive you. And as far as I was concerned, she wasn't our problem anymore.